Hey guys, tonight's story is about a sealed letter tucked into the sleeve of a dead cardinal, a woman who rose from her grave quoting scripture, and a ritual older than Christianity that still stains the floors beneath a monastery in Serbia. It's not just folklore, it's not just heresy, it's something else, something the church buried deeper than the devil himself. Because once you understand what the vampire really is, you'll realize the church was never trying to destroy it, but contain it. Because some things don't threaten your faith by attacking it, they threaten it by replacing it. So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake before the bells. The corridors are dark, cold with that kind of ancient chill that never quite leaves stone. You dress in silence, robes, gloves. You tie the sash without thought, the movements rote from years of service. The summons came at dawn, unsigned, sealed in red wax, slid under your door like a confession no one wanted to speak aloud. You don't ask why. You know better. The Vatican Library has many wings, but this one is not listed. No floor plan maps it. No one thanks you for knowing it exists. You are the archivist they summon when the things in the margins begin whispering again, when old blood seeps into new paper, when scripture starts humming too loud to ignore. You walk past the saints, past the marble apostles who don't move, but somehow seem to watch. The doors open for you, no one else. Inside it's colder still. Your breath is pale in the dark. The private wing smells of leather, dried flowers, mildew, and secrets, a mixture you've come to find strangely calming. You find the envelope already waiting, centered on the old desk, handmade paper, heavy, embossed with a Latin phrase in ink that looks far too red. De sanguine mutato, of the changed blood. You sit. You cut the seal with your knife, the blade slipping too easily through the wax. Inside, there's no message, just a single page, a reproduction, or maybe a scan of something far older than you're allowed to catalog. It's in Latin, but the handwriting is slanted, desperate. A priest's confession? A warning? You can't tell, not yet. What catches your attention first is the drawing in the margins. A figure bent backward, mouth open, fangs exposed, but it's not mythic. It's medical, anatomical even, numbered organs, arterial diagrams, like someone tried to explain the supernatural with science and failed at both. You've seen this before. A flicker at the edge of your memory, a reference buried in one of the locked catalogs. The Serbian case, Kisilova, 1725. The word vampire used not in legend, but in official military correspondence. Burials disturbed, corpses staked, blood found where there should have been none. You blink. The ink swims for a moment. You smell iron, real iron, not ink. You touch your nose, no blood, just memory, or something worse. Your hands tremble as you place the page into the folio sleeve. Whatever this is, it was sent to you for a reason. You open the archives, not the ones you supervise daily, the safe ones, the clean ones, the ones pilgrims might one day be allowed to see. No, you descend deeper, below the libraries, past the dehumidifiers, past the secret stairs and rusted locks and carved Latin inscriptions no one has translated aloud in centuries. You bring a lantern. You don't trust the electric lights down here. It's not the darkness that bothers you. It's the silence that feels expectant. The drawer is where you left it. Section 4. Non-canonical theological reports. Subfile. Post. Mortem anomalies. You pull it open and run your fingers across the spines of forgotten books. Bound in calfskin, rag paper, script in ink that's long since faded. You find it. An entry tagged Anselm, 1742. A Jesuit priest. Vienna. Dispatched during the vampire panic. You've read the summary before, but never requested the full copy. You do now. The file smells wrong. It's not mold. It's not rot. It's old fear. It clings to your gloves. Inside, field notes, letters, blood reports from Habsburg borderlands. Corpses that didn't decay. Villagers who described visitations. Witnesses who died within days of naming names. One letter, written in trembling hand, details a corpse that bled when staked, bled fresh, a groan escaping its throat. Sealed testimony by 2 surgeons and a priest, all signed. You close your eyes. You remember what they taught you. The church does not fear monsters. The church fears meaning. Vampires are not demons. They are fractures, violations, a corruption of God's order that can't be explained by sin or miracle. You open your eyes and you realize what the envelope was. A call, a handoff, a dare. Something has started whispering again. You've heard it before, in dreams you didn't know were yours. And now it's back, in blood, in paper, in doctrine. You do not breathe the word aloud, but it pulses in your mind anyway. Vampire. And this time, the church does not want it destroyed. Not yet. This time, they want it understood. The parchment is brittle, folded 3 times, sealed without insignia. No signature, no date. Only a faded crest at the top. Serbian, 18th century, pre-Habsburg consolidation. You know the iconography by heart. You've read thousands like it. But this letter isn't filed. It wasn't cataloged. It was hidden, stuffed between 2 volumes of botanical lore in the section no one touches anymore. You don't find it. It finds you. The script is smudged, hastily written, uneven, as if the author's hand trembled while putting thought to page. You begin reading without meaning to, as though compelled. It begins with a name you've never heard, in a village you can't find on any map. They buried him at sunset, it says. The villagers insisted on haste. No vigil, no sacrament, just a pit and a heavy stone laid across the chest. A priest, Father Luca, refused to perform the rites, claimed the man had confessed nothing, that he could not risk blessing what might not stay buried. 3 nights later, the grave was open. You pause. It's a common story, one you've seen repeated in folklore, in old wives' tales, in peasant myths the church long ago dismissed. But this account carries no embellishment, no poetry, no lesson at the end, just facts, just fear. You keep reading. A child was found the next morning, it says, pale, cold, her throat untouched, but her lips were blue. Her mother swore she'd seen a shadow by the window in the night, tall and rigid, with eyes like something that had forgotten how to close them. She died whispering, "He drank from me." The priest fled the same day, left behind his vestments, his books, even his crucifix. He boarded a wagon bound for Hungary, and when questioned by the guards at the border, he simply said, "It walks." The report continues, but the ink grows shakier. The writer, who never names himself, notes that the corpse was exhumed by the town elders without permission from the church, that the villagers claimed the body was unchanged. No rot, no rigor, eyes open, lips red. The butcher swore it, smiled at him. It took 5 of them to hold it down. They drove a stake through its chest, and it screamed, not with voice but with air, forced from lungs that should have collapsed weeks ago. Blood gushed from the mouth, thick and dark, as if pumped by a heart still beating somewhere deep beneath the rot. You look up from the page. The library is silent, but your skin feels watched. You tell yourself it's the content, that you're tired, that these stories seep when read alone, late, in chambers where the air doesn't move. But this doesn't feel like a story. It feels like confession. You continue. After the burning, the death stopped. For a time. Then the reports resumed, farther east, another village, another child, another grave disturbed. But this report, this letter, never made it to any bishop. It was never filed with the Holy See. The envelope is unmarked, the edges scorched, as though it had once been thrown into a fire and pulled out at the last moment by a hand unwilling to forget. You flip the page. On the back, in a different hand, there is a single sentence, scribbled in ink so faint you almost miss it. If this is resurrection, then Christ is not the only one who rose. You sit back. You are not a superstitious man. You have built your life on documents, on dates, on verifiable truth. You believe in canon, in context, in chronology. But this letter, it slipped the net. It lived between volumes, hidden not by chance but by fear, and whoever wrote that final line understood exactly what they were suggesting. Not a demon, not a metaphor, an abomination, a mirror of divinity with no light inside. You fold the page slowly. Your hands are damp. You return it to the sleeve, sealing it not for preservation, but to keep it contained. You were not meant to read this. And now, you cannot unread it. The key is small, plain iron, worn smooth at the edges from centuries of use or fear or both. It arrives not in a pouch, not in a reliquary, but in the hand of the senior cardinal himself. He does not speak as he presses it into your palm. He only holds your gaze for a moment longer than comfort allows, as if to say, you know what this means. And of course you do. You've seen the hallway once before, only once. A boy then, still too young to wear the robes, still too naive to understand the burden that waits behind silence. A place the others only refer to as Sototerra, beneath the earth, beneath the light, beneath the comfort of God. It's not a door so much as a wound in the wall, hidden behind the portrait of St. Dismas. You slide the painting aside, and the passage exhales dust, as though it had been holding its breath for decades. Your lantern sputters slightly, as if protesting what comes next. Still, you go. The stone stairs spiral downward, narrow and wet, with moss-like flayed skin clinging to the walls. The air shifts. Cooler, yes, but heavier too. Like something beneath has mass, not just presence. You count the steps out of instinct, not superstition. 47, before your boots touch level ground. The key turns in the lock with a sound that feels reluctant. This is not the Vatican library they show to dignitaries. This is not where saints are cataloged or miracles examined. This is where the unwanted goes to rest. Not the heretical. Those are burned. Not the unholy. Those are buried. This place is for the unexplained, the indecisive, the things too true to dismiss but too dangerous to preach. The hidden archive breathes around you. No torches. Just a single chain lamp, swaying from the ceiling above a stone table, casting slow-moving shadows across shelves that look more like tombs than storage. Every volume here is unmarked. No titles, no author names, only carved symbols. Some Latin, some older, some in languages that predate scripture. You reach for the shelf marked with a circle pierced by 3 thorns. You remember this symbol from whispered lessons in forbidden theology. Contra vitae, against life. The volume is thick, bound in what might once have been calfskin, though you suspect it isn't. When you open it, the first thing you notice is the ink. It isn't black. It's a brownish red, darkened with age, but unmistakably biological. Blood? Perhaps. Or perhaps just the imagination playing tricks again, the way it always does in places like this. The first entry is dated 1346, just before the plague. A priest's notes on a corpse that twitched when blessed. It had no pulse, no breath, but the eyes moved, not shut, not open, just flickering. The priest claimed he saw his own reflection in them, and that his reflection smiled. You flip forward. France. A report submitted by a nun. She described her abbess collapsing during evening mass, pronounced dead by the local physician, only to be found standing by the convent gate 3 days later, barefoot in the snow, eyes weeping blood. The body decomposed in reverse, skin firming, hair regrowing, teeth sharpening. The church sealed the abbey. The report ends mid-sentence. More pages, more years. Each entry colder than the last. They never use the word vampire. Not once. Too folkloric. Too pagan. Instead, they use phrases like mortui deambulantes, the walking dead, or redivivi sine anima, returned without soul. The most common, though, is the one you find scrawled repeatedly in the margins, over and over, sometimes in shaking hand, sometimes calm. De sanguine mutato, of the changed blood. You pause. That phrase again. The same as the envelope, the same as the seal, the same as the whisper that seems to echo faintly behind your ears whenever the lantern flickers too long in one direction. You close the book, slowly, as if it might scream. The key now feels heavier in your pocket than it did in your palm. You realize it was never meant to open just a door. It opens a gate, a path, a reckoning. Something has been waiting. And now, you are inside the silence where it lives. You were given a key, but you unlocked dread. The report is thin, bound with twine, tucked between 2 tomes on saint relics and a treatise on incorruptibility. You almost miss it. No index card, no annotation. Just a date. 1725, and the word Kisilova scratched into the edge like a wound. You sit with it under the chain lamp. The pages smell faintly of ash and cloves. The handwriting is clear, practiced, military. Not the rambling confession of a terrified priest, but the cold, efficient record of an Austrian medical officer assigned to a matter that should not have involved medicine at all. It begins clinically. The body of Peter Plogojewicz, male, approximate age 60, was buried on the 7th day following his death, in accordance with local custom. The priest present refused final rites due to suspicion among the townsfolk that the deceased had committed unspoken sin. You recognize the name. You've seen it before, whispered in the margins of other reports. It always comes back to this man. The officer continues. On the 10th night, his widow claimed to have seen him standing by her bed. She described his skin as ruddy, not pale. His mouth wet, as if he had just eaten. He did not speak, but stood watching. That same night, she died in her sleep, foam at the corners of her lips. The tone doesn't shift. No emotion, just observation. But you feel something cold begin to settle beneath your ribs. The following evening, a neighbor claimed to have encountered the deceased near his barn. The man stated that Peter Plogojewicz gripped him by the throat and whispered, "You are next." He died 2 days later. Cause: fever and severe blood loss through the gums. No external wound located. You pause. This isn't folklore. This is testimony. And worse, it's not even trying to be frightening. The horror is in its restraint. It doesn't beg to be believed. It simply states what happened. You keep reading. The mayor, under pressure from the townspeople, petitioned the imperial command to exhume the body. Permission was granted. Myself and 2 other officials were present at the disinterment, alongside the village priest and 6 able-bodied men. And then the tone changes. Slightly, barely, but it does. Upon opening the grave, we noted the following abnormalities. The body was not decomposed. The eyes were open. The mouth was wet with fresh blood. The limbs were pliable. The nails had grown. The chest rose slightly, as if still breathing. You feel your breath catch. Not from fear, not exactly, but from the sensation of standing at the edge of something that does not wish to be seen. A precipice of doctrine, of biology, of soul. You've read miracle reports before. Saints who do not rot. Martyrs who bleed centuries later. But this is different. This is not veneration. This is violation. At the insistence of the villagers, a sharpened stake was driven through the chest cavity. The body convulsed. Blood erupted from the mouth and ears. A sound escaped the throat that several present swore resembled a scream. The head was severed. The body was burned. Ashes were buried at the crossroads. There's no conclusion, no moral, no theological framing, just silence. Then the final line, written in smaller script, perhaps added later. The priest has since gone mad. Repeats the same word in Latin each night. Redivivus. Returned. You close the file slowly, not out of reverence, but calculation. You try to file what you've read into one of the church's many drawers. Heresy, folklore, demonic mimicry, but none of them quite fit. Because demons tempt, they twist, they corrupt. But this simply returns. It is not a seduction. It is a replication. The implication is what shakes you. If resurrection is real, then so is its shadow. If Christ rose, so can others. Without light, without grace. You run your fingers along the name again. Plogojowicz. Simple, peasant, nothing holy or monstrous about him in life. But in death, he became a mirror, a crack. The first body they couldn't explain, and the last one you'll ever truly trust. The surgeon's report is longer than most. Paged, ordered, annotated in a hand that is neat but inconsistent, like someone trying to hold their sanity still through sheer force of discipline. The seal on the last page is military, stamped with the crest of the Habsburg monarchy. Official, unflinching. But what lies inside is anything but. You unfold the first sheet and feel a prickle at the back of your neck. The parchment smells faintly of vinegar, old blood, and something harder to name, something like scorched wool left out in the rain. He begins with disclaimers. My name is Dr. Wilhelm Gerstner, surgeon in service of the 12th Battalion, dispatched to Kiselova on request of regional authorities following complaints of unnatural death. I submit this testimony under oath, with the full awareness that its content may compromise both my reputation and my commission. I do not offer theory, only observation. A good start. Measured. Controlled. But the next paragraph slips. The body was that of a man named Arnold Pauli, deceased 24 days prior. Local villagers claimed he had returned nightly to assault the living in their sleep. The priest declined involvement. I was asked to supervise the exhumation for scientific integrity. You turn the page. The ink is darker here. The pen pressed harder. The words less tidy. Upon unearthing the coffin, all present noted the scent. It was not of decay but of iron and wet meat, as if the body had been stored, not buried. I confess, I recoiled. It is important I say that plainly. I am not a timid man, but something in that moment disturbed me. You read slowly. Your eyes no longer skim. The tone is shifting. The skin was pink, not fresh, not decomposing, something in between. The eyes were closed, but lashes trembled. A trick of wind, I told myself. But there was no wind. He pauses in the report. You can feel it, even in writing. He tries to reset. I instructed the assistants to examine the abdomen. Upon opening the chest cavity, we observed a pool of thick, dark blood gathered near the sternum. The heart was whole. No signs of rot. I pressed the scalpel deeper, and the corpse groaned. The sentence ends there. Just that. No metaphor. No embellishment. You reread it 4 times. The corpse groaned. He continues. The assistants screamed. One dropped his torch. I admit, I fell backward. I saw no breath, no twitch, but I swear by every oath I've taken the sound was not in my mind. Others heard it. Later, when questioned, they each repeated it the same. A groan, low and wet, not from the throat, but from somewhere deeper. You hear your own breathing now, louder in the quiet of the archive. Your lantern flickers. You sit straighter, trying to shift the weight of dread collecting at the base of your spine. You keep reading. We severed the head to ensure stillness. The body bled, not in drips but in gushes, as if the blood had never stopped moving. The face contorted, not with pain, with awareness. That is my only word for it. Awareness. He underlines it once. I instructed the remains be burned at once. The final paragraph is shorter. I regret participating, not because I fear death or censure, but because I fear I have seen something true. And if this is truth, then we do not understand death. And if we do not understand death, what exactly have we been preparing for? The statement is signed, dated, witnessed. You check the signature against the registry. It matches. The man was real, decorated, died 6 years later of fever in the Balkans. No history of delusion, no scandal, no reason to lie. Still warm, skin pink, groaned when pierced. You circle those 3 phrases with your pen before you realize you've done it. Ink bleeding into the parchment like it too is unsure whether this belongs in the world of documents or confessions. The surgeon didn't ask for this, neither did you. But now both of you have touched it. And it, whatever it is, has noticed. The letter is short, handwritten, no seal, no letterhead, just 4 lines, penned in an unfamiliar hand. You will go to Medvedya. Do not wear robes. You are not clergy. You are not to intervene. Listen. Record. Say nothing. No blessing. No explanation. Just that. As if you are being asked to take notes on a thunderstorm or the aftermath of one. It arrives folded inside a plain envelope, delivered not by courier but by a sacristan who doesn't look you in the eye. He leaves before you can ask questions. You don't even try. You travel in silence, dressed not in cassock or crimson, but in the plain garb of a traveling archivist. A black coat, worn boots, no crucifix, no rings. Nothing that marks you as belonging to the church, even though your entire life has been defined by its walls. The train ride is long. Serbia rolls past the windows in grays and browns, frozen fields, forests that look half dead, even in summer. You read nothing. You write nothing. The leather folder rests on your lap, unopened. Inside is a map, the coordinates of a village that shouldn't matter, and a note reminding you that the church acknowledges no official position on local phenomena unless sanctioned by tribunal. Which is Vatican IV. We believe something is happening, but we can't afford to admit it. When you arrive, no one greets you. The station is barely more than a platform. The air smells of wet timber and rust. You walk. No carriage meets you. You follow the road on foot until the gravel gives way to dirt, and the trees begin to close in like ribs. The village looks like it's been waiting for you, not with hope, but with that tight-lipped silence people reserve for doctors arriving too late. A woman meets you at the edge of the square. She does not give her name. She simply says, "You'll want the house with the black door." Then she leaves. No further words, no welcome. You find the house easily. It's the only one with all the windows boarded from the inside. You knock. No answer. You knock again. Then, slowly, the door creaks open. A man stands behind it. Older, shoulders curved by the weight of years and grief. His eyes flick over your face, your hands, your coat. He says, "You're not what I expected," then steps aside. The room smells of damp wood, burnt herbs, and something faintly metallic. You sit. You do not speak. That was part of the instruction. He begins without prompting. "There were 11 dead in 1 week," he says. "None of them looked sick. No fever, no coughing, just tired. Then pale, then gone." You nod. You write. Your pen barely scratches the paper, the ink cold against the page. "We buried them fast," he continues. "But then the children started dreaming, said the dead were standing by their beds, not doing anything, just watching." He pours something into a cup. Raki maybe. Doesn't offer you any. Then the dog started howling. Every night. Same time. You hear that for 7 nights. You start to think maybe the old stories weren't stories. You write that down too. He takes a breath, looks toward the boarded window. "We dug one up. I know we're not supposed to, but we had to know. She was still pink, hair still growing, lips red. My cousin said he thought she smiled at him." He doesn't elaborate on what happened next. He doesn't need to. You've read enough. You know how these stories end, or rather, how they never quite end at all. When he finishes, he leaves the room. Not rudely, just quietly, as though the telling of it took something from him that he can't get back. You close your notebook. You are not here to perform rites. You are not here to bless or burn or cast out. You are here to listen, to record, to say nothing. And yet, as you step outside into the gray hush of evening, you realize something is already changing. In you, around you. The air feels different, more aware, like something has noticed your presence. Like something waiting just beneath the soil has turned slightly toward the sound of your footsteps. And you have no robes to protect you now. The dirt road winds into Medvedja like a scar across skin. The trees thin out. The houses appear, crooked, low, ancient things that look more like they've grown from the ground than been built atop it. Their roofs are heavy with moss. Their windows are narrow, all shuttered, though the hour is still early. When your boots crunch into the village square, the silence swells like lungs drawing in breath. A woman carrying a basket glances up, then down, then turns sharply and disappears behind a door. You hear the latch click. Another man, old and bent, stands by a well. He watches you for a moment. Then he lifts one shaking hand and crosses himself. Not the swift, reverent motion of prayer. No, this is slower, deliberate, as if shielding himself from something already inside the village. You pause, unsure if you should return the gesture. A dog growls somewhere, then silence again. There is no inn. Not really. Just a house at the edge of the square with a wooden sign that swings soundlessly in the breeze. Garlic hangs in thick braids over the doorway. Old garlic, browned and desiccated. A horseshoe is nailed to the lintel. You knock once. No answer. Then the door creaks open on its own. The woman inside does not speak. She looks at your face, then your boots, then the folder in your hand. She shakes her head once, then she crosses herself. You smell smoke, sweat, and something sharp beneath it. Clove, maybe, or ash. You ask if there's a room. She doesn't reply. Instead, she lifts a lantern and walks out the back door. You follow. Behind the house, a narrow path cuts up toward the church. The graveyard curls around it like a nest of bones. New mounds, old crosses, stones so worn the names have been swallowed by time. The woman leads you to the church doors, then leaves the lantern at your feet and walks away. You step inside. The church is cold, smaller than you expected. Bare walls, no icons. A crucifix, but the Christ figure is shrouded in cloth. You do not ask why. You do not speak aloud. The pews are empty. In the corner is a cot, laid out with a blanket, folded clean but stiff with damp. Beside it, against the far wall, is a fresh grave, the earth still soft and mounded. No marker yet, just a wooden stake planted at its head, rough, unsmoothed. You sit. You do not pray. The folder rests on your lap. The reports from Kiselova, the surgeon's testimony, the letter with no signature. They are heavier now, not metaphorically, physically, as if the paper itself has begun to absorb the weight of what it contains. The church creaks, wood shifting against stone. You tell yourself it's the wind, but the wind hasn't moved since you arrived. You open the window above your cot just a crack. Outside, you see the woman from before lighting a candle in her window. A second later, her neighbor lights one too. Then another, a dozen flames. Then 20. Then more. The entire village. Candles in every window. No words, no songs, just light against the dark. A ritual. You don't understand it. You're not meant to. You're not here to interpret. You're here to witness. From your place on the cot, you glance back at the grave. There is no smell, no sound, but you can feel it. The way one feels a mouth forming words behind a closed door. You lie down. You do not sleep. Not yet. Because in this place, when strangers arrive, the village crosses itself. And when the village crosses itself, something is being kept in, not out. You are woken by footsteps. Not loud, but insistent, measured, like a procession with no music. When you sit up, the church is dark. The candles burn down to wax puddles. Your breath clouds in front of you. You follow the sound outside. The village is awake, not all of it. Just the men. 7 of them. Lanterns in hand, tools slung over shoulders, shovels, rope. One carries a wooden stake, long as a sword and twice as sharp. No one speaks. No one looks at you. You follow anyway. They do not stop you. The path twists beyond the last house, where the earth slopes downward into a grove choked with crooked trees. At the center, freshly turned soil. A grave, new, not yet marked. You recognize the shape of it. The one beside your cot in the church. The men begin digging. The priest is not here. There is no cross, no incense, no verse. This is not a rite. This is something older. The shovels strike earth, rhythmically, until the thud turns to knock, and the knock to hollow. Then silence. 2 men drop to their knees and begin scraping the dirt away by hand. One makes the sign of the cross, but backward, from right to left, palm inward. You've never seen it done like that. They lift the lid. The stench hits first. Not rot, not entirely. It's sweeter, thicker. The air trembles with it. The lanterns flicker. The corpse inside isn't a corpse. Not by any definition you've known. It's pink. Not fresh, not quite, but present. Moisture clings to the skin. The lips are dark, cracked but full. The eyes are closed, but fluttering beneath the lids, like someone trapped in nightmare. And then it groans. Low, wet, from the belly, not the throat. One of the men steps back, crosses himself violently, and mutters something in Serbian you don't understand, but feel. The others do not hesitate. The stake is raised. You open your mouth to stop them, to say something, anything, but nothing leaves your throat. You are frozen, rooted to the earth, like the dead thing before you. The stake comes down. It pierces flesh, and the body screams. Not a groan, not a gasp. A scream. Long, hollow, full of rage. The eyes fly open. Bloodshot, glistening, aware. Blood erupts from the mouth. It pours over the edge of the coffin. Thick, red, alive. Your knees buckle. You grip a tree to stay upright, bile rising in your throat. Your vision narrows to pinpricks. Your lungs forget how to breathe. And still the thing moves. Its hands twitch. Its tongue writhes behind broken teeth. One man draws a flask from his coat and pours oil over the body. Another strikes a match. His hand shakes. The flame dies. He lights it again. Then, whoosh. Fire catches like it was waiting. The body thrashes, crackles. The mouth opens in a final furious scream that sounds less human than wind through a crypt. The hair ignites. The flesh bubbles. The smell is unbearable. Charcoal and bile, and something that smells like burnt sugar. You stagger backward. The light reflects off their faces. Stoic, grim, unchanged. This is not new for them. For you, it is everything. When the fire dies, nothing is left but ash and blackened bone. No one speaks, no prayers, no absolution, just the hiss of cooling earth. The stake remains upright, embedded in the charred chest like a flag in conquered land. One of the men turns to you, eyes unreadable. "You saw," he says. Not a question, not an invitation, a judgment. And he's right. You saw what should not be. You saw a body that wasn't dead until they made it so. You saw something the church refuses to name. And now it lives inside you, that scream, that blood, that stare, like something that's found its next witness, its next vessel. You turn away and vomit into the grass. And the earth, wet with ash and blood, accepts it without complaint. You sit at the church's altar, not out of reverence, out of necessity. It is the only place with a table and a chair that doesn't creak like it's begging you to stop. Your lantern casts long shadows on the marble, black ribs stretching across the walls like something trapped behind them. You open your ledger. The quill feels heavier than it should. You begin clinically. That's what they expect. That's what the Vatican requires. Facts arranged like stones, cold, unfeeling, unshakable. Subject: ritual exhumation observed in Medvedja. Date: unspecified. Local calendars do not match Rome's. Participants: 6 adult males, 1 unidentified woman witness. Priest: absent, refused presence, refused comment. You pause. Ink pools at the tip of your pen. You write: deceased exhumed 21 days after burial. No decomposition observed. Skin pink, lips red, hair growth present. You glance down at your notes from the field. They are smudged, some of them wet. You don't remember when your hand began to sweat. Upon exposure to air, the body emitted a groan. No visible movement from lungs or throat. Stake applied directly through sternum. Corpse expelled blood in large volume. Sound described by villagers as a scream. Witnessed independently by this author. No logical respiratory cause determined. You feel yourself tightening as you write that line. Every part of your training urges you to strike it out, replace it with something acceptable. Sound resembling air pressure release, or involuntary post-mortem reflex. But you don't. You continue. Corpse ignited using flammable oil. Flames consumed body entirely. No resistance observed after initial combustion. Ash consistent with organic material. Remaining stake recovered intact. You pause. Set the pen down. Rub your eyes. Behind your lids, you see the eyes of the thing in the coffin, the way they opened. Not in confusion, not in pain, but in recognition. You pick the pen back up. Assessment. Event resembles collective hysteria, likely rooted in post-plague trauma and cultural superstition. Lack of ecclesiastical structure has led to unorthodox death rituals. Recommend further observation only. No formal action required. That's what you write in the report. That's what the cardinal will read. But your hand, without thinking, moves to the margin. There, in smaller letters, as if hoping no one else will see. Real. You stare at the word. It looks wrong in your script, like someone else wrote it through your fingers. You try to cross it out, but the ink doesn't dry. It stays wet, bleeds slightly. You flip the page, heart hammering. On the next sheet, you try again. Clean. Detached. Logical. No evidence of demonic interference. No signs of necromantic rite. The participants displayed fear, not reverence. If this was ritual, it was not worship. You want to stop there. You should stop there. But your hand keeps going. I heard it scream. I saw it bleed. It looked at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. As if it knew what I was or what I wasn't. Your pen shakes. You set it down again. The candle beside you gutters. A whisper of air brushes past your ear. The church creaks. You tell yourself, it's the wind. You don't believe it. You take the page. Fold it. Place it in the back of the ledger. Not in the official section. The hidden one. The place where truth goes when it's too dangerous to speak but too terrible to forget. Your final line, written smaller than the rest. If this is resurrection, it is without grace. You sign your name. Then you close the book. And you swear you hear something breathe behind you, even though the grave beside your cot was burned to ash. You do not turn around. The flame is small, but it feels enormous in the dark. You keep it beside the cot, on the floor, on a saucer blackened by hours of melted wax. You stare at it longer than you mean to, watching it flicker like it's breathing, like it's listening. The candle wasn't lit when you went to bed. You remember that clearly. You remember thinking you didn't need it anymore, that your duty was almost done, that you'd written the report, folded the truth into quiet margins, sealed it under polite language and Vatican diction. You remember lying down, stiff-backed, hands folded over your chest like a penitent. You remember the silence of the church, the same silence you once found comforting, the kind that echoed with centuries of prayer. But it didn't echo tonight. It absorbed. You must have drifted off, because you woke with a jolt. Not from sound, from sensation, a pressure. Not weight, just presence. You sat up fast. The church was still. Your skin soaked. You couldn't name the dream, but it left you shaking. And that's when you heard it. Scratching. Not loud. Faint. Rhythmic. Like nails brushing slowly across wood. From beneath. You didn't move. You told yourself it was a rat. A tree limb. Your mind replaying fragments from the grove. But the scratching didn't come from the walls or the windows. It came from below, from the grave beside your cot. You didn't breathe. You couldn't. Your hand reached for the candle without command. You struck the match so fast you burned your thumb. The spark flared, violent at first, then softened into glow. The sound stopped. All at once, the silence returned like a lid snapping shut. You sat there, crouched, the flame trembling in your grip. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. You don't know how long you stayed that way, but eventually, your knees ached, your teeth chattered. You placed the candle down, gently, and stared at the floorboards. And you reached into your coat. Your fingers found the crucifix. It was never meant to be used. A gift from a mentor, more symbolic than sacred. You'd packed it out of habit, not conviction. But now you hold it like a drowning man clutches driftwood, not because you believe in vampires, but because a part of you now does. The thing in the box. Whatever it was, whatever it had been, it groaned when pierced. It bled. It screamed. And it looked at you. That memory won't dissolve. You've tried. You told yourself hysteria, cultural delusion, biochemical anomalies. You used every tool the Vatican gave you to keep belief at bay. But belief doesn't ask permission. It waits, quietly, until your guard lowers. And now you're sitting on a cot beside a grave, holding a crucifix with shaking fingers, staring at a candle you don't remember lighting, praying to a God you're no longer sure is the only thing watching. You glance at the window. All the houses still burn their own candles, the whole village, as if the light is a contract, as if something ancient watches for darkness, like a wolf circling firelight. The flame sputters. You lean forward instinctively. The wax pools, stretching toward the edges of the saucer. You think about the body, its eyes, its mouth, the heat of it, its wrongness, and something settles in you, like sediment in water. Not fear, not yet, but understanding. There are things the church does not explain, because to explain them would be to legitimize them, to give them shape, and shape gives power. So they are erased, or buried, or renamed. But you know what you saw, and you know what you felt rising from the earth beneath you just minutes ago. You place the crucifix beneath your pillow. You do not blow out the candle. You lie down slowly, like someone who expects to be woken not by light, but by movement. And you stare at the ceiling until your eyes burn. Sleep does not come, but morning will. And God willing, so will you. Customs asks nothing, not about your papers, not about the box. You half expect someone to stop you, a train official, a border guard, a priest who can smell the sin in your breath, but no one does. You walk off the platform in Rome as though you are returning from a lecture tour or a library symposium, not from a pit where something human once lived in a body that refused to die. The satchel is heavy, not in weight, but in consequence. The box inside is lined with wax cloth and lead, sealed twice. You watch them pack it, methodical, reverent, like it was something holy or cursed. No one said the word vampire. They called it material. They called it evidence. You carry it in silence, knuckles white around the handle. Your robes feel strange on you now, stiff, decorative, like a costume you no longer believe in. You're back in the heart of doctrine, walking the marble halls of sanctified denial, where everything has a name and a ritual, and nothing bleeds in the dark. The senior cleric greets you in the archive vestibule. He wears red and gold, smiles like someone who's never heard a corpse scream. "Back so soon," he says. You nod. He doesn't ask what you saw. He asks for the report. You hand him a version, edited, clean, starched white. No mention of groaning. No mention of eyes that opened. No stake. No fire. Just anomalies. Suspected psychological hysteria. Theories on embalming errors. Local fungal infections. Rare diseases that mimic animation post-mortem. He reads the summary. Doesn't even raise an eyebrow. "Good," he says. "We'll log it under rural deviancies. Balkan division." He gestures to the box. "This is it?" You nod again. He takes it, does not open it. The ash inside shifts slightly as he lifts it. You wonder, briefly, if it's still warm. He thanks you. You are dismissed. Just like that. No confession. No debrief. No absolution. You walk back to your chamber like a ghost with skin. The corridors echo around you. Latin chants rise from the chapel below. You pass a crucifix and pause, too long. The blood on Christ's brow suddenly looks theatrical, clean, sanitized. Because you've seen what bleeding really looks like, and it doesn't resemble redemption. You return to your desk. Your hands tremble as you remove your notebook. Not the one you turned in, the real one. The one that contains what actually happened. You leaf through it until you find the sketch. Charcoal rubbed fast, but detailed. The face, the mouth, the eyes. You stare at it. You remember its scream. And you ask yourself something you haven't dared until now. If this is real, what else have we misnamed? Not metaphorically, theologically. Because you've seen incorrupt saints. You've kissed their bones. You've venerated flesh that never spoiled. But you were never told the difference between incorruptibility and refusal. You were never told resurrection had a counterfeit. The ashes in that box, they weren't just from a corpse. They were from a claim. A declaration that death is not what we think it is, that something else wears the shape of salvation and twists it backward. You should burn the notebook. You don't. Instead, you tear a page from the back. You write a single sentence. There is another theology, one we do not preach. Then you fold it. Place it beneath your pillow. The box is gone now. Carried into the vaults. Categorized. Forgotten. But you carry it differently. Not in your satchel. In your marrow. The manuscript is not cataloged. You find it deep in the restricted stacks, shelved behind a row of anatomical drawings, so fragile they disintegrate at the edges when you breathe too close. It is bound in leather that no longer smells like leather, but something older, something iron-rich. Your fingers hesitate over the spine. There is no author on the cover. Inside, only initials. T, F, C. You recognize them. Dr. Theodor Franz Kalmit, physician, scholar, heretic. He was once the pride of Vienna's medical academy, until he wasn't. The index card tucked into the manuscript sleeve is written in Latin. 4 lines. Disputed theories of corporeal persistence, withdrawn by ecclesiastical order 1750. 1. Author excommunicated, status deceased. You sit on the cold stone floor. You open the first page, and the smell hits you. Subtle, but unmistakable. Dried blood. Not from a quill. Not the kind that dots the parchment in careful script. This was spilled. A thumbprint. Faded now. Brown and flaked like rust. You press on. The writing is meticulous. The hand tight and logical, even as the ideas begin to unravel. I have examined 7 bodies reported as incorrupt over the course of 2 years. In all cases, decomposition was either arrested or reversed. The flesh rehydrated post-burial. Hair and nails continued to grow. The skin took on a hue not of preservation, but of hunger. You stop. Go back. Not preservation, but hunger. You keep reading. He describes a woman buried near Zagreb, a nun, sealed in a crypt after death by plague. 2 weeks later, the caretaker heard weeping from within the walls. When they opened her tomb, her lips were moist, her eyes open, her teeth sharp. He notes this without flair. No superstition, no poetry, just observation. Another case. A bishop interred in oak and lead. 17 days. When exhumed for relocation, the body was warm, not tepid, warm. A pulse, faint but rhythmic, was recorded in the carotid artery. The assistants fainted. One fled the church entirely. Dr. Kalmet wrote, "These are not miracles. They are imitations. Shadows wearing holy robes. A second gospel, authored in blood. You feel a coldness settle beneath your skin." The church called his work blasphemous distortion. He was condemned. his license revoked, his name scrubbed from liturgical records. No trial, no debate, just silence. But this manuscript, it survived. You turn the page and something falls from between the sheets. A scrap of cloth. Stiff, frayed. You lift it carefully. It smells faintly of clove and smoke. Pressed into its corner, a mark, a sigil you don't recognize, but it looks familiar. The next page is smeared. Not ink. You touch it. Flake. Grain. Iron taste on your fingertip. More blood. More than a fingerprint. A splash. There is no note to explain it. But the handwriting on the following page is shakier, as if written in haste or pain. They came in the night. Said I had seen too much, but I have not seen enough. What feeds in the tombs is not evil. It is order. Death undone, not by God, but by something that envies him. You close the book. You stare at the spine again. The title is unmarked, but you know what it should be. Doctrine of the Imitator. You should return it to the shelf, but your hands won't move, because in this quiet corridor beneath Rome, you realize something no prayer has prepared you for. The dead are not always resting, and holiness is not the only thing that survives the grave. Brother Eusebius finds you in the cloister garden at dusk. You aren't praying, you're pretending to read. A psalter lies open on your lap, but the words don't stick anymore. The verses used to feel like anchor rope. Now they feel like noise. He stands there quietly, hands folded. He's old. Older than most here, hunched like the trees that survive too many winters. You've been reading in places not meant for reading, he says without accusation. You don't deny it. He sits beside you on the bench, slow, with the sound of knees that gave up years ago. I did the same once, he says, eyes fixed on the horizon. It doesn't unmake your faith. It only unearths it. Then he places something in your lap, a codex, wrapped in dark cloth, tied with thin cord. The bundle is heavier than it looks. The cloth smells faintly of frankincense and sweat. Don't read it at night, he says, still not looking at you. Why? He turns to you then, and his face isn't stern or kind. It's tired, because it doesn't like being remembered. He stands, walks away. He doesn't wait for thanks. You sit with the bundle for hours. The sun sets. The garden empties. Still, you don't move. Finally, in the solitude of your chamber, you open it. The cloth falls away like old skin. The cover is thick, dyed black. No title. The pages smell of wax and iron. It's written in Latin, but older than the church's Latin. Ecclesiastical, but something beneath it that feels misused, bent, like theology repurposed. The first section is diagrams, not drawings, rituals, circles, lines of salt, symbols you've only ever seen, carved into the walls of tombs or in the margins of excommunication records. One page describes a rite using the blood of a priest to bind an unquiet one to its own grave. Another calls for wax and ash mixed with olive oil and bone powder to be poured over the heart of a revenant to still its false pulse. None of these bear imprimatur. No ecclesiastical seal, just annotations in red ink. You flip further. The second half is prose. A confession, signed by a bishop. I, Matthias of Amalfi, once of the Holy See, record this not for vindication, but for containment. What I saw in the crypt was not a demon. It was not a ghost. It wore my deacon's face. It spoke with his voice, but it drank from the neck of a choir boy, and its eyes were black as the moment before sleep. You blink. I ordered it chained. The chains rusted. I ordered it burned. It would not catch. I recited the rites. They only made it laugh. I pressed my crucifix to its brow. It wept, not in pain, in memory. You begin to sweat. The bishop continues. It asked me to remember its name, not to curse it, not to forgive, just to remember, as if that made it less monstrous, as if memory was proof of soul. You close the book. Your pulse is loud in your ears. There's a footnote, handwritten at the bottom of the page. He was buried in secret, beneath the old seminary in Trento. If the door bleeds, do not open it. You wrap the codex again, slower this time. As you tuck it beneath the floorboard, your hands tremble, because you realize something. This wasn't given to you by accident. Brother Eusebius is no fool. He knows what this is. He knows what you've seen. He knows what's waking in the cracks between dogma and silence. He knows you're beginning to believe, not in vampires, but in something worse, the possibility that they were once part of us, and that we wrote them out of the gospel not because they were heresy, but because they were close. You sit cross-legged in the deepest alcove of the archives, where dust weighs more than silence, where the shelves groan with manuscripts so old the ink is flaking into memory. You've gone past what's indexed, past what's permitted. You're looking for something that doesn't have a name. The folders are not marked vampire. That would be too simple, too loud. You search under demonology, and that's where you find them. Red folders, no labels, just numbers that skip and stutter like someone was afraid to number them in sequence. You flip through reports like wounds, all clinical, all detached. Subject exhibited photophobia. Subject refused crucifix. Subject bled from eyes when Gregorian chant was played. Subject was buried, then not. Over and over again. But the words they use are careful. Entities, manifestations, possessions. Possessions. That's how they filed it. Not undead, not revenant, but demonically animated corpse. It sounds sterile, safe, familiar territory for a church comfortable with devils. But then you find the file that doesn't fit, tucked sideways in the wrong drawer, old, almost brittle. Inside, only a paragraph, written in Latin, translated by hand. A classification memo, unsigned. The vampire is not a demon, it is not a devil, it is a contradiction. You read it again, then a third time. It mimics the resurrection of Christ, but without his light. It rises from the grave with memory, but no mercy. It walks with blood, but without soul. It eats flesh and drinks blood, but not to redeem, only to remain. Your mouth goes dry. You flip the page. Someone has drawn two diagrams, side by side, a crucifixion, and beside it, a man, mouth stained, arms outstretched in mock benediction, rising from a grave. Same pose, same frame, same silhouette, different purpose. The memo continues. The devil tempts, the vampire imitates. The devil wants your fall. The vampire wants your shape. It copies sanctity, then hollows it. It is heresy made flesh. You close the file slowly. The room feels smaller now. You finally understand why they buried it in demonology. Not because it was a demon, but because there was nowhere else to put it. You've studied demons. They lie. They provoke. They twist scripture. But they never blur the line between salvation and hunger. They never rise in graves that once held martyrs. They never make you question whether the tomb was supposed to stay empty. The vampire does. You remember the body in Medvedja, the way it bled, the way it screamed, and how your first instinct wasn't fear. It was recognition. You leave the folder open and write in your own notebook. What if evil doesn't need to oppose God, only to mimic him badly enough to be mistaken? You stop. You realize something. No church would know what to do with that. A thing that doesn't tempt you with sin, but with semblance. A thing that doesn't want your soul, only to wear your rituals like a second skin. That's why they filed it here. Not because they understood it, because they didn't, because it looked too close, too familiar, because it rose from the grave, not with holiness, but with memory. It's late, past Compline. The halls of the library hum with the soft ambient breath of stone. Quiet, yes, but never quite silent. You were meant to be returning a volume, a sanctioned one. Lives of the Saints, bound in pale leather, gilded edges so sharp they could draw blood. You take the long way back. You always do now. It's not that you expect to hear anything, but sometimes, if you move slowly enough, the building forgets you're there. The church is careful during daylight, but truth speaks best in corners. That's when you hear them. Two voices, whispering, not in confession, not in prayer, and not in Latin. Italian, low and urgent, not infernal. That's the danger. A pause. You freeze behind a column, hands tight around the spine of the book. The vampire walks not from hell, one says, but from purgatory, uninvited. Your breath catches. The other voice answers, older, cautious. That's not doctrine. That's the point. Their footsteps echo lightly as they pace. You shift silently, easing closer behind the marble, heart knocking against your ribs like a fist on a locked door. You said you saw it. The second voice mutters, I did, 2 years ago, in Pex. A boy who had not sinned, died young, pure. But when they opened the grave, his hands had moved. His mouth was red. You're certain? I watched the priest burn him. A silence then, heavy. You grip the leather of your book tighter. The second voice breaks it. You think purgatory opens both ways? I think we've misunderstood who it was Jesus raised. The words are soft, but they crack through you like ice. You want to step forward, ask them what they mean, demand clarity, but your feet stay rooted. There's something sacred in their fear, something honest. The older voice speaks again. We cannot preach that. No, but we can prepare for it. They start walking again, footsteps fading toward the stairwell. You stay hidden until they're gone. Your legs feel brittle when you move. You retreat to your chamber without finishing your errand, the book still in hand. You light a candle and stare at your own reflection in the small brass basin near the wall. You've aged, not in the mirror, but in your eyes. You whisper the words to yourself. From purgatory, uninvited. That isn't how it's supposed to work. Purgatory is a waiting room, a place of fire and grace, temporary, measured, tethered to redemption. But what if the tether frays? What if something stirs in that waiting place and finds its own way out? Not summoned, not damned, just unfinished. You sit at your desk and flip through your journal, past the diagrams, past the classified folders, past the confession of the bishop, and then you find it. A note you scribbled weeks ago, barely legible. If resurrection can be mimicked, then who decides which graves should stay sealed? You hadn't understood what you meant when you wrote it. Now you do. Because if the vampire is not hellspawn, if it's not punishment, if it's a misfire of grace, a soul that got lost on the way back, then it is not heresy. It is tragedy. And you are not hunting demons. You are witnessing errors. You close your journal slowly, and for the first time, your hands tremble, not from fear, but from pity. The key is handed to you without words. It's old, iron, warm from another palm. The monk who gives it doesn't meet your eyes. He only gestures toward the chapel, toward the altar, toward the stone stair that vanishes beneath the sanctuary like a vein cut too deep. You descend with a lantern. The abbey above is still, hushed by centuries of prayers, layered over one another like sediment. But below, it feels like no one has spoken here in years. The air changes at the third step, heavier, wet, as though the breath of the earth thickens the closer you get to its secrets. Each footfall echoes like it doesn't belong to you, like you're following yourself into the dark. The crypt is a long corridor with rounded walls and alcoves like mouths carved into the sides, each one sealed with limestone, some etched with names, others worn blank by time. You count them as you walk. 23 before you find hers. Contessa Elisabetta di Spira. The inscription is fine, ornate, wreathed in angels whose wings look too sharp to comfort. She was buried 70 years ago. You check the records, sealed in sanctified soil, no suspicion of impropriety, no illness, no plague, no scandal, just silence. And yet, the villagers whisper. They don't come near the abbey after dusk. The sacristan locks the chapel before evening bells, and more than one has claimed to see her, not standing, not walking, weeping, through stone. You kneel, press your palm to the tomb. Nothing. Cold limestone. Dry. You close your eyes. Still nothing. You should leave. That's what the church expects. Observe, report, return. But you don't. You sit. Wait. Let the lantern dim a little. Let the quiet settle like dust. And then, a sound. So faint, it might be breath. Or trickling water. But there is no water here. You lean forward. It comes again. A sigh. Long, trembling, human. You freeze. It isn't behind you. Not from another alcove. It's beneath you. You press your ear to the stone, and you hear it, weeping. Not loud, not performative, not ghostly. Just sad, wrecked, like someone remembering too much. You sit back, heart hammering, hands numb. You whisper a prayer, not to cast out, not to banish, just something old, something gentle. The weeping stops. You don't breathe. A moment later, something else answers. Not a voice, a scratch. 3 soft taps from inside the tomb. You stand too fast. Your lantern sways. The flame flutters. You almost drop the key. You stare at the inscription again. At the date, 70 years. Long enough for rot. Long enough for silence. But not, apparently, long enough to forget how to cry. You don't open it. That is not your order. That is not your right. Instead, you kneel again. You press 2 fingers to the seal and say her name aloud. Elisabetta. There's no reply. But something changes. A pressure lifts. As if the crypt exhales, you walk backward to the stairs, never turning your back to the tomb. When you reach the first step, you look up and see the chapel's stained glass window glowing above you. Christ, risen, wounds open, arms wide. For a split second, it reminds you of something else, of another rising, of something that mimics salvation and mourns it. You don't sleep that night, but you do pray. And for the first time in weeks, you don't pray to understand. You pray to remember. Because whatever was sealed in that crypt beneath the abbey was not evil. It was forgotten. And now, it weeps. The coffin is not wood. It's stone, carved from a single block of marble, unmarked but polished smooth like something meant to be admired, not feared. It takes 2 monks to slide the lid. They grunt. The stone groans. Dust rises from the seal, like breath escaping after too long held in. You hold the lantern high, arm trembling from the weight, and step closer. The light spills over the edge of the tomb, and you stop breathing. She looks asleep. Not in the way saints sometimes do. Those glass coffin bodies paraded for the faithful, skin waxed and touched up by reverent hands. No, this is different. This is wrong. There's no scent of decay, no sign of time, no shrinkage of flesh. Her hands are folded neatly over her chest. Her lips are closed. Her skin, not pale, not gray, rosed faintly, like someone resting after confession. And her eyes are closed. You kneel, not out of reverence, out of caution. You whisper a prayer, not one from the rite of exorcism, just the oldest one you know, the one your mother said when thunder struck close to home. Sancti Michael Archangel. Your voice echoes. The monks stay behind you, silent. You lean forward. Her chest does not rise. There is no breath. But as your light steadies, you see something that freezes the marrow in your bones. Her eyelashes, they twitch. Just once. A spasm. A flick. You pull back, knocking your shoulder into the stone. The lantern swings in your hand. Light dances across the vaulted ceiling. The air shifts, thickens. One of the monks gasps. The other backs away entirely. You don't move, because her eyes, they're opening. Not fast, not a jolt, but slowly, as if woken gently from a dream she did not want to leave. The whites are clear. The irises, black. Not empty, not lifeless. But watching, you don't scream. You pray louder. Defende nos in proelio. The temperature drops. Your breath fogs the glass of the lantern. Her eyes stay fixed on the ceiling, not darting, not unfocused. Just still. The kind of stillness that knows it doesn't need to move to be feared. You finish the prayer. Her lips part. You step back. No sound escapes her mouth, but you feel it. A pressure, like something invisible shifting in the room, like memory curling its fingers around your throat. The monk beside you drops to his knees and begins to sob. The other one runs. You want to run too, but your feet are nailed to the ground by something you can't name. Her eyes remain open. There is no scream, no growl, no cinematic flourish. Just a woman who should not be there, and a presence that makes you realize you've misunderstood everything about silence. You step forward, 1 inch, just enough to set the lantern gently on the edge of the tomb. You bow your head and say only one word. Why? There is no answer, but the air answers for her. It grows heavier and warmer, and suddenly, you understand. She was not waiting for resurrection. She was enduring it, trapped in the imitation of peace, held beneath stone not by death, but by containment. Her eyes close again. You fall back onto the floor, shaking. The monk who fled does not return. The one who stayed can no longer speak. You seal the tomb again. You say nothing to the abbot. You return to your quarters with wax in your ears and prayer on your lips. But that night, her eyes stay with you, because they did not look empty. They looked aware, and you wonder, not what she is, but what we made her. The room is lined with books older than the country you were born in. Illuminated manuscripts sleep behind glass. Canon law codices rest like bones on velvet. You're seated across from a cardinal whose robes are the color of clotting blood, his rings too heavy to lift without habit. You were summoned, not invited. He doesn't look at you at first, just reads. A folio open before him. Your report. The one you should have burned. The silence isn't a pause. It's a verdict waiting for sentence. Finally, he speaks. You are not a theologian. You nod. No, Eminence. You are not a priest. I'm aware. He shuts the folio with a sound, like a door closing. But you've seen something. Your fingers tighten on the chair. I've seen many things, you say. And yet this is what you write? He holds up a page. Your words in ink still damp from fear. The vampire is not a demon. It is a blasphemy of hope. He tosses the page onto the table between you like it might bite him. Do you know what resurrection is? He asks. You open your mouth. He cuts you off. It is not returning. It is not reanimation. It is not flesh stirring in the dark. He leans forward. Christ rose because he was holy, because he was the Logos incarnate. Resurrection was not his reversal, it was his completion. You meet his eyes. And what if something else is trying to imitate that completion? His gaze hardens. They can't. They're not sacred. They don't even possess souls. You speak slowly, but they remember. His mouth tightens. They hunger. They weep, Eminence. Because they are parasites. He hisses. You don't flinch. They scream when we burn them. You say softly. They bleed. He slams his palm against the table. And so did he. The room goes still. The echo lingers longer than it should. You both breathe. He looks down. Runs a hand over the gold-pressed title of a book neither of you want to name. When he speaks again, his voice is low. Do you know why they are dangerous? You don't answer. Because they almost make sense, he says. Because if we let them exist, if we give them a place, then what separates miracle from mistake? He picks up your notes, reads a line aloud. If incorruption is a sign of sainthood, then why does the vampire not rot? He looks at you. But this time, there's no anger, only fear. That is exactly the danger. You say nothing, because deep down, you know he's right. That's the terror, not in what they are, but in what they almost are. A parody, a copy, a second gospel, written in silence and sealed in blood. He doesn't excommunicate you. He doesn't need to. He simply hands the pages back and says, forget them, but you don't, because you can't. Because there is a grave somewhere, right now, holding something that remembers being a man, and waiting to be misnamed again. You find it folded into the back of a Greek psalter, tucked behind the last hymn like a secret confession never meant to be read aloud. The ink is faded, but not ancient, no more than 2 centuries old. The script is careful, slanted, too even to be rushed. This was written by someone who believed every word. It has no title, no author. Just a single phrase at the top in red ink, underlined once. On those who do not decay. You read it in the flicker of a candle, because the electric lights here never quite reach the corners of the restricted stacks. The walls hum with silence, the kind that feels watched. The paper begins with a question. What if incorruptibility is not proof of holiness, but interference? You stop, reread it, then read it again. It's blasphemy, or it would be, if it weren't so quiet about it. The next paragraph outlines cases, not folklore, not hysteria, but documented burials, names, villages, dates, bodies placed in the earth, wrapped in prayer, sealed with sacrament, and later exhumed, untouched by time, lips still red, eyes still closed. But no miracles, no healings, no visions, just preservation. Too preserved, the writer says, as if decay tried to begin and was denied. They argue this isn't grace. It's something else. Not sanctity, but stasis. And beneath it, hunger. You keep reading. These are not saints. They are captives. Souls not yet judged, not yet free. Suspended between the grave and the throne. The body remains untouched, not because it is holy, but because something holds it here. The term the writer uses is the bound. It appears again and again. The bound do not rot. They do not rise. They endure. They remember their flesh and wait for someone to call their name in just the right way. Then they answer. Your throat tightens. You flip the page. There's a diagram. Not anatomical, theological. A triangle. God at the peak, man at the base. And somewhere off to the side, a mark labeled not demon, but mimesis. Imitation. It doesn't oppose God. It copies. You close your eyes. In every case you've studied, every body that should have withered but didn't, there was no glory, no incense, just dust and dread. You return to the manuscript. Near the end, the tone shifts. The writer begins to plead. We must not canonize every body that fails to decay. We must not mistake refusal for redemption. There are souls that imitate sainthood because their punishment is not fire, but proximity. One final line, scrawled by a different hand, added later in Latin. Rome forbids this teaching. You flip the psalter shut. Suddenly the library feels colder. The candle gutters. And you understand. This was not exiled for its absurdity. It was buried for its precision. Because it names something the church has only dared whisper about. That the body of a saint and the body of a vampire can look the same in the ground. That incorruptibility isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a sentence. You tuck the paper back into the psalter, careful not to crease it further. You don't copy it. You can't. Some truths aren't meant to be duplicated. You return the book to its shelf. But the phrase follows you down the hall, echoing behind your footsteps like a whisper pressed to the back of your neck. Those who do not decay, saints, or something that wants to be. You sit in the chapel long after the last bell has rung. No one else remains. The candles are near stubs, flickering shadows along the stained glass saints. Christ weeps crimson light down the marble floor, and still he does not speak. You are not here to pray. You are here to think. The devil, they say, tempts. That is his nature, to twist, to beckon, to offer something you already want, and dress it in enough light to look like revelation. But the vampire, you stare at the altar and realize you've misunderstood everything. The devil wants your fall, but the vampire wants your place. It doesn't tempt, it imitates. Not just Christ, though that is the loudest heresy, but you. Your rituals, your habits, your hungers. It watches from the grave and learns how to be you without ever once understanding why. The devil seduces with sin, but the vampire, it seduces with permanence, with stillness, with the illusion of safety. No pain, no rot, no death. It gives you the one thing no prayer can promise, continuance. Even the saints, with their bleeding palms and whispered intercessions, do not promise that. Only the vampire does. And it offers it without mercy, without confession, without grace. Just blood. You lean forward, fingers trembling against the pew. You remember the body in Medvedja, the scream it made, the tears you thought were pain. Now, you aren't so sure. You remember the woman in the abbey, the marble casket, the eyes that opened not in rage, but in awareness. And you remember what the cardinal said, his voice shaking under the weight of its own fear. That is exactly the danger. You understand now. The devil points at the forbidden fruit and whispers, "It will make you like God." But the vampire becomes like God, without permission, without sanctity, without understanding what it means to die and rise. It is not evil in the theatrical sense. It does not command legions. It does not roar. It replaces. Silently, slowly, one imitation at a time. It takes the shape of the thing you love most, resurrection, and hollows it out. And worse, it survives judgment, not because it is righteous, but because it refuses to be judged. You think of purgatory, the weeping woman behind the stone, the child who whispered, He drank from me. Not demons, not fiends, but people held between breaths, stuck in the shape of salvation. Long after the soul has gone, you stand. The candles flicker harder now. The air shifts. You aren't alone. Not really. Because somewhere, not far from here, something remembers your face. Something that still wears the memory of its name. Something that walks beneath your feet. Not because it escaped damnation, but because it ignored it. And you understand. The devil wants you to fall, but the vampire wants the world to forget you ever rose at all. And that is the greater blasphemy. They send you quietly. No blessing, no robes, no seal. Just a letter folded 3 times, bearing the seal of a diocese that no longer wants to be associated with what's happening in the hills outside Rakovich. The dead boy's name is Luca, 17, died suddenly. No priest summoned, no sacraments given, no cross carved above his bed. His mother found him cold before sunrise, lips blue, limbs stiff. And yet, the villagers did not call for burial. They waited for the moon. You arrive just after dusk. The path is narrow, lined with gnarled trees and the smell of earth thick enough to chew. The village has no inn, no guest chamber. A woman points to the church steps. You sleep there, if you sleep at all. The grave has already been dug, not by clergy, not by grave diggers, by the villagers. The priest is absent. You ask where he is. The woman who answers you crosses herself and mutters, "Gone." They bury him barefoot. No shoes to weigh him down, no rosary on the chest, no coin for Charon, no name spoken aloud. Just silence, and garlic stuffed in the mouth. They wrap him in a sheet, soaked in salt water and wine. Then they bring out the iron. You do not ask. You only write. Unbaptized male, rural ritual, suspected of impurity and death. You do not know what impurity means to them. Only that their hands tremble as they tie his limbs. Only that they drive a nail through the heel of his left foot before lowering him. You are here to observe. That is what they told you. You are not to speak, not to bless, not to touch. But when they lower him into the earth, you feel something tug in your stomach. Not sorrow, warning. You step closer. The wind shifts, and you swear. You hear a breath. Not from the villagers, not from the trees, from the coffin. You shake it off, write it down. Auditory anomaly, possible wind through trees. But then the boy's mother begins to wail, and the sound she makes, it isn't mourning, it's pleading. The villagers do not comfort her. They finish shoveling. They lay a net of black thread over the grave, weighted with stones at each corner. Then they scatter millet. You ask nothing. You only write. Protective customs, folk tradition. But your hands are cold. The burial finishes just before midnight. The moon is bright, too bright. The villagers leave without speaking. No vigil, no prayers. Only you remain. Because part of you believes the boy is not alone down there. Part of you wonders if he's waiting for you to leave. And part of you, though you will never admit it, begins to pray. Not loud, not with hope, just enough to fill the space where something else might try to speak. You stay until the sky begins to pale. Nothing happens. Nothing rises. No scream, no claw, no breath. But you do not feel victorious. You feel watched. You feel like something beneath the earth did not need to move to make its presence known. You walk back to the chapel without looking behind you. And for the first time in months, you don't write a report. You only whisper 3 words. Over and over. Don't wake him, because something in your bones tells you he's not sleeping. The dare isn't spoken like a challenge. It's spoken like a curse. The villagers don't ask. They tell you. You want to know? One of them says, folding his arms. Then stay. You nod before thinking, before praying, before remembering what it's like to be alone in a place where the holy feels thin. They laugh softly as they leave, not cruelly, just knowingly, the way a man might laugh while watching someone step onto cracked ice. The chapel is old, wooden beams, stone floor, no tabernacle, no priest, no relics, just the shape of faith left behind, like a skin too worn to keep. The pews creak when you walk past them. You choose the front row. You set your satchel beside you. You light one candle. No more. The moonlight slants in through the high window. Cold silver crosses the floor toward the altar. There's dust on everything, but not untouched dust. Disturbed. Like something passes through here, more often than anyone admits. You say nothing. You do not pray. You sit. Hours pass. The silence deepens. Midnight comes. You feel it before you hear it. A shift, like breath exhaled beneath the floorboards. You stiffen. The candle flickers. Then comes the sound. Soft, deliberate. Movement. Behind the altar. Not footsteps. Something else. A brush. A scrape. A weight dragging against stone. You stand. Slowly. The chapel doesn't welcome it. The air tightens. Your throat feels like it's wrapped in linen. You walk forward anyway, each step echoing like you're interrupting a ritual that has no room for witnesses. You reach the altar. Still nothing. But the candle bends sideways, toward the sound. You wait. Then, a shadow, quick, impossible, passes across the far wall. You whip your head around. Nothing. Your mouth is dry. Your spine aches from how tightly you're holding yourself upright. You whisper a name. Any name. Saint or savior or sinner. You're not sure. And then something shifts behind the altar again. Closer. You step around it. And stop. There is a door. Small. Half hidden in the wall. Closed with a rusted latch and sealed with wax. But the wax has cracked. Split straight down the center. And something wet is on the handle. You don't touch it. You don't need to. The chapel groans around you. Wood. Settling. Or resisting. The candle goes out. No wind. No breath. Just dark. You step back. Slowly. Not turning your back on the door. Your heel knocks against the altar leg. It doesn't feel like wood anymore. It feels like bone. You don't scream. But you do leave. Not fast. Not loud. You take the satchel. You walk out into the night. The village is silent. Not asleep. Just listening. You don't tell them what you heard. They don't ask. You return to the house where you've been staying. You do not sleep. And when dawn comes, you write nothing. You only carve a small mark into the side of your journal. A crescent. It means something moved. And it knew you were there. It begins as a whisper. You're not sure at first. The chapel groans in the wind. The roof creaks. Mice scurry in the rafters. You've told yourself this before, written it down, categorized it, explained it. But this isn't wind. It's too pointed, too slow, a syllable carried on a breath that does not belong in this world. It comes again, not loud, not clear, but directed. It isn't calling for help. It's calling you. You rise slowly from the pew, hands slick, heart crawling up your throat like it wants to escape before you do. You scan the dark, altar, door, corners. Nothing. The whisper comes again, closer. This time, it forms your name. Not perfectly. Bent through a mouth that's forgotten how to shape words. half gurgled, half memorized, but accurate enough that something primal inside you snaps awake. You bolt to the doors. You grab the iron handle, twist, locked. You didn't lock it. You never locked it. You twist again, harder, shoulder bracing, arms trembling. The wood won't budge. The handle burns cold in your grip. The whisper becomes a murmur. Then a voice that knows too much. Not loud, but steady. And it says your name again. Not in Latin, not in Greek. In something older, a language you've never studied, but somehow understand. It doesn't speak to you. It speaks into you, like it's carving the word from the inside of your skull. You stagger back. The candle has gone out. You didn't see when. You didn't hear the flame die. Now, only shadow. You turn toward the altar, your back to the door, and the voice is waiting there. Not above, not behind. Below, under the floorboards. Your name again. Drawn out this time. Not threatening, not kind, just patient. You drop your satchel, back away, hands out like they might stop something you can't see. And then, something answers. Not with words, with movement. The floor beneath the altar creaks. A slow weight pressing up from underneath. Wood bending like ribs. Dust shaken loose from the rafters. You fall to your knees. Not to pray, but because your legs stop remembering how to stand. The voice shifts tone. It asks you something. You don't know the words, but you understand the meaning. Why did you come here? You don't answer, but the thing already knows, because it says your name again, not like a threat, but like a memory. And suddenly you realize, it's not calling you, it's remembering you. Your heart stutters. You think of the letter, the village, the boy they buried, the cracked wax on the door behind the altar. You weren't sent to investigate. You were sent to replace someone. And now the thing that shouldn't speak is waking up for you. The floorboards groan again. You crawl to the wall, nails scraping stone. The windows are too small, the door too heavy, the whisper too close. You press your forehead to the cold wall. And you hear it. Your name. Spoken one final time. Soft. Pained. Like it mourns you. Like it knows what will happen next. Then, silence. Thick. Total. The floor no longer creaks. The handle turns freely now. You run into the night, lungs burning, tears drying on your cheeks. You don't stop running until the sun rises. And even then, the name follows you. Yours. But not quite. Not anymore. The wind outside howls like it's trying to speak. You've barricaded the door with pews, toppled and stacked. You've drawn every sigil you know in chalk and ash. You've lit every candle in the satchel, until the chapel glows with the warmth of 100 tiny suns. But none of it stops the thing scratching beneath the floor. Not scratching like a rat, scratching like something, remembering. You clutch the crucifix in both hands. Your knuckles are white. You press it to the floor, to the altar, to your own chest. You whisper every Latin prayer burned into you during years of study. Nothing holds. The scratching becomes a thump, then another, like knuckles knocking from the other side of the world. You hold your breath. And the candles begin to die. 1, then 3, then 6 at once. The last one, nearest you, flickers twice, pauses, then goes out without sound. Now it's only you, the dark, and what waits beneath. You reach for the book, the one wrapped in cloth, hidden at the bottom of your bag. The one Brother Eusebius warned you never to open in solitude. Don't read it at night, he said. But this is not night. This is before night. The book hums when your hand touches it. Not sound, but resistance, like it doesn't want to be held by hands too desperate. You unwrap it. Inside, the ink is rust-colored, thick, smells faintly of iron. The pages whisper as you flip them. Not from movement, from memory. You find the page, marked with a symbol that's not quite a cross, not quite a scythe, just enough of both to unnerve you. The prayer is in no known tongue. It bends your mouth to speak it. You resist. Then you feel the floor bulge, just slightly, as if it's breathing. You begin. The first word feels like swallowing glass. The second, like exhaling blood. By the third, your crucifix grows cold. Too cold. You drop it. It doesn't clatter. It just stops being there. Your voice shakes as you speak the rest. The air ripples. The wood groans. And beneath you, the thing screams. Not loudly. Not even angrily. It screams, like something that's been remembered after centuries of being forgotten. The sound tears through the walls, shaking the glass in the windows, rattling the ribs in your chest. Then silence. Total. Even the trees outside have stopped. Even your breath. You don't move. And that's when you feel it. The prayer is still speaking through you, even though you've stopped. The words keep rolling in your mind, not in your voice, in its. And your body no longer feels entirely yours. You look down at your hands, and they shimmer, just slightly, like a reflection in water you've just touched. Your soul feels thinner, not gone, just stretched, like parchment pulled too tight across an old drum. You shut the book. Immediately, the hum vanishes. But something inside you doesn't. You walk outside as dawn breaks. You survived. But you know something else came with you. Something still whispering the prayer. Something still watching the inside of your skin. The crucifix remains on the chapel floor. You don't retrieve it, because you know it would burn. Not from heat, but from recognition. The sun rises, but it feels like a trick. It spills across the stones like honey gone sour, too thick, too slow. The birds do not sing. The air tastes like iron. You walk through the village with the gait of a man returning from a war no one else saw. They look at you. Then they look away. The baker who smiled yesterday does not meet your eyes. The old woman who once handed you water crosses herself without turning her head. A child points, then hides behind her mother's skirts. You are no longer a visitor here. You are an event. Your hands tremble as you reach for the chapel door. Not out of fear. Not anymore. It's something worse. Recognition. You slept, but not really. There was no dream. Just a constant pressure behind your eyes, as if something sat inside your skull and waited. You open the chapel. The pews are still toppled. The crucifix still lies on the floor, untouched, its chain curled like a dead snake. The book is gone. You did not move it. You don't know where it went. You go to the basin of water near the altar. Not holy water. That's long since evaporated. Just rainwater, gathered in a stone bowl beneath a leak in the roof. You kneel, and look. The face is yours, but not quite. The left eye lingers a second too long in the reflection, before following your movement. The skin beneath both eyes seems thinner, sallow, like something inside has been feeding on your sleep. And at your temples, streaks of ash gray. You lean closer, not from age, not from shock, from contact. The change isn't physical. It's atmospheric, like the color itself is fleeing the parts of you that were touched. You want to look away, but the mirror, if it can even be called that, pulls at you. And for just a breath of a second, your reflection smiles. You didn't, but it does. Then it's gone. You splash water across the surface, as if that will undo the moment. It doesn't. You leave the chapel. The villagers do not ask what happened, and you do not tell them, because words are no longer protection. They are invitation. You return to your room. You wash your hands 3 times. You write in your journal, but the ink runs near the bottom of the page. The line stops halfway through a sentence. You try again, and feel a pressure in your wrist, as if your hand has been given a second opinion. You step outside once more, not to flee, not to report, just to move. And in the distance, you hear a bell toll. Not from the village, not from any church, from below, somewhere in the stone. It rings once, then falls silent. But your gray hair does not fade, and your reflection still waits. The hall smells of paper and age and silence that has hardened into ritual. You stand beneath frescoes older than the language you used to survive. The cardinal reads your report without speaking. His eyes move too fast, as if he already knows what it says, as if the words are not new, but returned. You did not write everything. You couldn't. There are no Latin categories for what stared up from the floor beneath the chapel. No theological footnote for what whispered your name like a psalm dragged through grave dirt. But you wrote enough. Enough to damn yourself if they ever wanted to. The room is cold, not from weather, from avoidance. They keep it cold so nothing decays too fast, or lingers too long. Finally, the cardinal closes the folder. No signature, no stamp, just a thin red thread, wrapped twice around the pages and tied in a knot so old it looks ritualistic. He places it in a drawer, not a vault, not a reliquary, just a drawer, then locks it. You hear the click. He doesn't meet your eyes. Instead, he stands, walks to the window. The sun is out, but it looks dim through the thick glass. A world far away, clean, unknowing. He turns back to you, smiles. Too wide, too gentle. Good man, he says. His hand finds yours. Not to comfort, to still. Thank you for your discretion. You don't reply, because you know the script now. What is spoken is safe. What is written is sealed, and what is true must be buried. He walks you to the door, says something soft about rest, about recovery, about God's mysterious ways. You hear none of it, because behind his smile, his eyes are screaming. He read the part you shouldn't have written. The last page. The one about the voice that knew your name. The one about the mirror. The one you almost burned. He read it, and you both understand now. This is not heresy. It's inheritance. You step into the corridor. The door shuts behind you with a gentleness more final than any slam. And just before it closes, you hear his voice again. Not to you, to himself. A whisper. He said it out loud. Then silence. The kind that follows someone being erased before they're gone. You walk the marble hallway, past saints in stone, past angels who never blink, past doors that never open unless someone has died. No one stops you. You are not exiled. You are not punished. You are simply unspoken, erased with a smile and a file drawer, as if silence could contain what followed you home, as if red thread could bind something that breathes through stone. And yet, as you leave, you feel it again, the memory of a name spoken in a voice that doesn't forget. Yours, waiting, beneath, where drawers can't reach. It's not filed where it should be. You find it by accident, or maybe something wants it found. The drawer is mislabeled, Acts of St. Cuthbert. But you're not looking for saints anymore. The file is thin, wrapped in vellum. No red thread this time, just a single wax seal, cracked by age or intention. You hesitate before opening it, not out of fear, but reverence. Reverence for something older than doctrine, older than containment. The first page is in Latin, the ink faded, the hand frantic. Dated 895 AD. The The words are clean, at first, formal, observational, the kind of writing meant to reassure Rome that nothing was amiss. A bishop, traveling through Gaul, sent to examine a corpse that would not decay. You read faster. The corpse belonged to a woman. No known sin, no formal excommunication, but the villagers whispered that she had been strange, slept during the day, spoke languages no one taught her, smiled too often at infants. When she died, her body was sealed beneath the church. Then, 3 days later, it was found weeping blood. Not leaking, not decaying, weeping. The bishop demanded it be reburied. But each time they sealed the crypt, the blood returned. One priest tried to cleanse it with relic water. He died the next morning. Eyes burst, tongue black. The bishop stayed. He fasted for 3 days. He prayed through the night. And on the 4th day, he wrote what would become his last testimony. She's not damned. She's not saved. She's not dead. She remembers us. The next page is torn. What remains is a drawing. Crude. Charcoal. A face. Not hers. His. Mouth open in terror. Eyes missing. A final line scrawled beneath it. Martyrs do not always bleed for Christ. Sometimes they bleed for truth. You flip to the last document in the file. A church record. Dry. Bureaucratic. The bishop was found dead. Alone. In the crypt. Kneeling. Head bowed. His heart had been removed. No wound. No incision. Just gone. The church canonized him within the year, but only for his silence in life. Not for what he wrote. Not for what he saw. You sit back. The walls feel closer than they did before. You glance toward the hallway, half expecting a shadow to lean through the doorframe. Nothing. You pick up the file again, and notice something new. A faint reddish fingerprint on the back page. Too small to be the bishop's. Too fresh to be. From 895. You touch it, and the paper feels warm. You don't mention this discovery. You don't log it. You place the file back in the wrong drawer. Gently, carefully, almost gratefully, because some truths are not preserved. They're remembered by things that never sleep. The church does not fear monsters. It fears mirrors. You begin to understand this, somewhere between the sleepless nights and the sealed drawers, between the forbidden words and the reflection that smiled without you. You thought the Vatican hid the truth to preserve its grip on the world, to maintain its image, to silence questions, to protect its power. But that was arrogance. Now you see the cracks from the inside. Power isn't what they're protecting. It's you. Because some truths don't make you free. They make you unclean. You sit in the library, long after the last bell tolls, alone. The candles burn low. The air is thick with parchment dust and breathless expectation. You've surrounded yourself with the records they tried to bury. Not just the vampire cases, but the footnotes, the excommunications, the revised hagiographies. The patterns are there, if you know how to see them. Saints who died without decay, declared miracles. Corpses who rose without sainthood, declared anathema. Same signs, same condition, different interpretation. The difference, you realize, isn't in what they were. It's in who blessed them. You read again the words of the bishop who died in 895. She is not damned. She is not saved. She is not dead. And suddenly, the real danger unfolds before you. Not a creature drinking blood, but a soul refusing rest. You flip through another file, this one dated 1346. A monastery in Bohemia, sealed for doctrinal heresies. The abbot claimed to have spoken with a woman who had returned from the grave. She quoted scripture. She asked for communion. She wept at the cross. But she did not rot, and so they burned her. Not because she was evil, but because she was possible. Because to believe her was to question the cornerstone of everything. Resurrection. Not as metaphor, not as promise, as pattern. And if the dead can rise without grace, if flesh can return without the soul's permission, if incorruption is not holy but feral, then what exactly is salvation? What is Christ's rising if the devil mimics it better? You lean back. The candle nearest you flutters. You swear it leans toward your breath, even though you haven't exhaled. You stare at the crucifix on the wall, and for the first time, it feels insufficient, beautiful, but small. A symbol that holds light only so long as nothing else shines like it. And vampires shine, not with glory, with proof. Proof that the boundary between life and death is not moral, but mechanical, not divine, but permissive. You understand now why the church calls them blasphemy, not because they oppose doctrine, but because they fulfill it without God. They are what happens when resurrection is stolen, not given. When eternity is clutched in bloody fingers rather than received in open hands. And so the church hides it, not to lie, to shield, to protect the terrified hearts who need a resurrection that means something, who cannot survive a world where even the damned do not die. You look down at your own hands, still steady, but thinner. You think of the voice that said your name in a language that carved. You remember the warmth of the forbidden book. You remember the mirror, and you realize you have not written a word since. Not because you've forgotten, but because you believe. And belief is the final surrender, the final undoing. Because the doctrine was never about what rises. It was about what shouldn't. And you've seen it, heard it, felt it whisper behind your teeth. Now, it remembers you, too. The road back to Medveja is longer than you remember. Not in distance, but in weight. The sky is gray, not with storm, but with hush. A silence that sits on your shoulders like a hand you cannot see. The trees lean in. The wind forgets to blow. You carry no robes now, no vestments, no books. Only a satchel. Inside, one vial of holy water, one sharpened stake, and the prayer you swore you'd never speak again. Not written, just remembered. The village appears like a bruise at the base of the hills, small, still, pretending nothing ever happened. But the garlic above the inn door is fresher now. The children no longer play after dusk, and the church bell hasn't rung in weeks. You don't ask questions. They wouldn't answer anyway. You sleep in the same room. The bed is smaller, or maybe you are larger. Not in body, but in awareness. As if every step you've taken since leaving this place has widened some chamber in your mind that never closes now. At night, you listen. Not for sounds, but for absence. Because you've learned that when the dead stir, it's not noise they bring. It's vacancy. The dogs don't bark. The trees don't creak. The air goes still, as if the world is holding its breath. On the third night, it happens. A knock at the door. Not frantic, not loud. Just deliberate. You don't answer. You don't need to. Because it moves on. To the next house. And the next. Like a visitor who knows the way home but has forgotten the door. The next morning, the innkeeper's daughter has a scratch across her wrist. She says it was a nail from the barn. You don't argue. You simply nod and leave a small vial of water on their windowsill. You go to the church. The grave beside it, still fresh when you last saw it, is cracked now, subtle, just enough that the soil has shifted. You kneel beside it. Say nothing. Your prayers are not for show now. They are for protection, for binding, for reminder that the earth still has rules, You sleep in the chapel, not because you must, because you want to be the one who hears it first. If it happens again, the scratching, the breath beneath the stone, the whisper that knows your name, but it doesn't come, not that night or the next, but you still keep watch, because that is who you are now, not a priest, not a scholar, not even a believer in the way others are. You are a witness to the thing that mimics grace without needing it, to the body that rises without permission, to the truth the church will never preach but never forget. You carry the water, you carry the stake, you carry the silence like a relic no one carved but everyone feels. And when the children pass you in the street, they lower their eyes, not in fear, in recognition, because monsters are easy to forget, but watchers stay. You lean against the chapel door, eyes heavy, hands folded. You are tired, but not weak, because you know what waits. You know what remembers, and you are ready. You sit by the chapel window, watching the fog rise off the graves like breath returning to the dead. It's quiet now, always is, just before realization. You once thought the church feared the vampire because it broke the laws of nature, because it defied burial, because it rose. You were wrong. That isn't what frightens them. What frightens them is that we want it. We love it. The vampire doesn't claw its way from hell. It walks out of our longing. It is beautiful, impossibly so, pale, but never sickly, cold, but never dead, timeless, poised, powerful. It doesn't threaten with horns or pitchforks. It beckons. It invites. The devil tempts you to fall. The vampire offers to catch you. You begin to understand why the church didn't just suppress these stories. They buried them, rewrote them, misnamed them, because nothing spreads faster than a lie wrapped in the shape of grace. The vampire doesn't punish sin. It removes the need for forgiveness altogether. No more guilt, no more groveling, just forever. You run a hand through your hair and feel again the streak of gray at your temple, a scar from knowing. The villagers say nothing, but their silence is different now. It's no longer fear. It's complicity. They leave offerings by the graves, not to ward off evil, but to appease it. A child's doll, a bottle of wine, a rosary that's been rubbed so smooth it no longer has texture. You saw a young woman whisper to the ground last night. She smiled, not in horror, in hope. The church would call it blasphemy. You call it recognition. Because what is the vampire, really? A Messiah with no cross, a miracle with no martyrdom, a gospel without guilt. It is the Antichrist, not because it opposes Christ, but because it mirrors him too closely. It offers resurrection without grace, blood without covenant, eternity without judgment. It walks among the broken and says, you do not need to be fixed, just fed. You've read enough now to see the shape of it. Across centuries, across continents, each culture with its own name, each story, its own warning. But always the same promise. You do not have to die. You do not have to beg. Just open the door. The church fears it because the pews are thinning, because the faithful are tired, because grace is hard and hunger is easy. You touch the crucifix around your neck. It's heavier now, not because it's metal, because it means something again. It's a choice, a rejection, not of the vampire's horror, of its appeal. You understand finally why they burned the bodies, why they staked the dead, why they lied. Because if we believed, truly believed, that something could rise without God, we'd follow it. And we have. In stories, in songs, in shadows. The vampire doesn't need to kill us. We come to it willingly, Because deep down, we want eternity. We just don't want to pay for it. The fog thickens outside. You watch the sun try to push through, and you feel it again. That thin part of you, that echo in your breath that isn't quite yours anymore. But you hold the crucifix tighter, because you remember what it costs. And you remember what it doesn't. You stay at the window. You stay because you must. Because the world isn't choosing anymore. It's already chosen. And now, you watch.